My fiancé is deeply in love with my sister. Upon learning of their mutual feelings, I proposed to call off the engagement. My fiancé refused. I only care about her because she's your sister. You're overthinking it. Later, my sister accompanied me on a spring outing, where we encountered bandits who kidnapped her. The bandits forced him to choose between us, but he disregarded my pregnancy and chose my sister. My sister smiled triumphantly, while I was brutally tortured by the bandits, resulting in the deaths of both of us. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day he came to propose to my family. Chapter 1. It was the second month of spring, with grass growing and swallows flying, but I had no heart to enjoy it, for bandits were holding a sharp blade to my neck, forcing Shuangwen to choose between us. I held my swollen abdomen and looked at Shuangwen, whose gaze was fixed on my sister, begging him desperately, "Husband, please choose me. The child in my womb is already 6 months old." Before I could finish speaking, my kind-hearted sister also began to weep, her tears streaming down her face like rain. "Mr. Shen, please choose my younger sister. She is your wife and is pregnant. As for me, I am alone in the world, my death would be of no consequence." I knew I was doomed. Sure enough, Shuangwen, who had been hesitating, chose my sister and told me, "She is the eldest daughter of the minister of the secretariat, of noble birth. I should choose her. As for you, you have a wicked heart. Your death is no loss." Ah, Zhu. I didn't even know he called her so intimately. He didn't know either that it was all arranged by my kind-hearted sister. Before we were captured by the bandits, she had taunted him. "Soon you'll see that Shuangwen favors me the most. You're doomed." He escorted my sister away, while I was surrounded by the bandits. I was terrified for my life and begged for mercy, knocking my head until it bled. All for the sake of the child in my womb. In the end, I was tortured to death amidst the lecherous laughter of the bandits. "Miss, I heard that the new top scholar is in the front hall discussing matters with the master. He seems to have the intention of asking for your hand in marriage." A familiar voice reached my ears. I looked at Xinger in front of me. She was still alive, unharmed from protecting me from Zhong Aizhu's brutal beating. My swollen abdomen had flattened. Joy flooded my heart. I had been reborn. Reborn at a time when everything was still possible. Seeing that I didn't speak, Xinger waved her hand in front of my face. "Miss, what's wrong? You're not happy, are you? You should know that although the eldest miss looks down on Mr. Shen, he is well-read and handsome, with a bright future ahead of him. However, your father has high standards and cannot agree to this marriage. Yet he cannot back out either. In the end, the marriage will be yours." "Yes." My father would never agree. Before I could respond, I lifted my skirt and hurried toward the front hall. When I arrived at the front hall, I saw Shuangwen already kneeling on the ground. "Now that Shuangwen has passed the imperial examination, I have come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage. Please grant your daughter to me as my wife." My father pondered for a moment before helping Shuangwen to his feet. "Since that is the case, I will make arrangements. We will choose a date for you and Mingyue to marry." As soon as my father finished speaking, Shuangwen's eyes filled with resentment and shock. In my previous life, I had thought that this marriage was a great blessing for me. Now it seems like it's just the beginning of a tragedy. However, before I could speak, Zhong Aizhu's voice rang out. "I refuse. Father, Shuangwen is talented and has a bright future. How can you bear to give such a good match to my younger sister?" It was clear that my father's eyes were filled with surprise. I was also stunned. Could it be that she had also been reborn? In my previous life, Shuangwen had proposed to my father, but my father had promised me to him. Shuangwen was unwilling and argued with my father. In the end, It was Zhou who came up with the idea to make Shen Qingjian back down. And the marriage ended up being arranged for me. I only found out about all this after our wedding. At that time, Zhong Aru found me, stepped on my face with her foot, and said contemptuously, "A poor scholar, even if he is the top scholar, is nothing but a rat from a gutter. How could he be worthy of the eldest daughter of the Minister of Works? He is more suited to a lowly creature like you." At the time, I only thought Zhong Aishu was blind, and marrying Shen Qingjian was my chance to rise above my station. Later, I did indeed rise above my station. Shen Qingjian rose through the ranks, becoming chancellor, a powerful official second only to the emperor. But the one he truly longed for was my sister. However, my father spoke up, his expression serious. "Marriage is no trivial matter. Qingjian, give your old father one night to consider this." Shen Qingjian immediately bowed in gratitude. "Thank you, Minister." After Shen Qingjian left, Zhong Aishu couldn't wait to speak up. "Father, this marriage must not be allowed to go through with that lowly girl Mingyue." Then she whispered a few more words in my father's ear, and my father's eyes lit up immediately. "Is that true?" Zhong Aishu nodded. "It's true." I sighed in relief. Indeed, she had also been reborn. Unfortunately, what she didn't know was that Shen Qingjian, despite his outwardly charming appearance, was a complete hypocrite. At that time, I was deeply in love with Shen Qingjian, and after we married, we treated each other with respect. I served his frail and ill mother, who had an eccentric temperament, and managed the household affairs for the entire family. However, he remained indifferent toward me. It wasn't until later that I discovered he truly loved my older sister and had a wife in the countryside. Because I sent someone to investigate his wife's affairs, and the news leaked out, he feared his reputation would be ruined, so he secretly ordered someone to brutally kill his wife. It wasn't until after I died that I finally understood why he had said I had a wicked heart and deserved to die. In this lifetime, let them suffer everything they deserve. Not long after I returned to my room, Zhong Aishu came knocking. Upon seeing me, she sneered with disdain. "Father has already agreed to my marriage with Shindarin. How does that make you feel? I bet you'll kneel before father for 3 days and 3 nights for that man." But alas, a lowly whore remains a lowly whore. What you can't beg for on your knees, I can get with a flick of my finger. In my previous life, I did indeed beg on my knees. Now that I think about it, I only regret that I was blind and chose the wrong person. Seeing I didn't respond, she kicked me to the ground. "Why aren't you saying anything? Have you gone mute?" After kicking me down, she still wasn't satisfied and stomped on my hand with her foot. As she was about to step on the bracelet my mother left me, I silently protected it and replied, "The young miss is absolutely right." But this only made her even more enraged. She snatched the bracelet from my hand and examined it closely, then snorted coldly. "I thought it was something precious. But it's just a worthless trinket. It must have been left by your lowly dead aunt, right?" Before I could respond, she pressed on. "Why aren't you answering me? I'll let go if you don't." "Yes," I hurriedly replied. "It was left to me by her. Please spare me, miss." Before I could finish, the bracelet had already fallen to the ground, shattering into pieces. She watched my disarray with satisfaction, then slowly leaned in and spoke. "You don't really think that the lowly concubine who drowned 3 years ago died by accident, do you?" "Actually, it was my handkerchief that fell into the water. I ordered her to retrieve it for me, but after I pushed her into the water, she drowned. Do you know how ridiculous she looked struggling in the water?" In that moment, I felt as though I had fallen into an ice cave. Though I was the second daughter of the minister of the left, my birth mother was merely a concubine. In their eyes, concubines were no better than slaves. The children born to concubines were no different from beasts of burden to be beaten and abused at will. Back then, I thought my mother had simply slipped and fallen into the water. I never imagined. She once told me, "Mingyue, it's all because your mother was born into a lowly family. Just endure it. Life is what matters most." In my previous life, I too believed that enduring it would be enough. But now, mother, relentless submission only leads to losing one's life. The pain of shattered jade piercing my skin snapped me back to reality. I looked at the broken bracelet and stopped picking it up. Zhong Eishu saw this and asked, "Why aren't you picking it up?" I lowered my eyes and replied, "The young miss is right. It's just a broken bracelet. It's not worth keeping." Zhong Eishu saw my expression and seemed bored. She cursed a few times and left. After sending Zhong Eishu away, I began to think about how to handle the situation. Given the current circumstances, both of us had been reborn. This meant that what I knew, she also knew. For example, Shin Qingjian would become a powerful minister and would always harbor feelings for her. In her eyes, as long as I didn't marry Shin Qingjian, she would win for sure. It was precisely for this reason that she had taken the initiative to reclaim the marriage in this lifetime. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile. The fact that the Minister of Rights agreed to the marriage was a stroke of luck. This time, these two people with equally malicious hearts must be locked away. In fact, Shin Qingjian's life in his previous life was not smooth sailing either, although he climbed his way into the Minister of Rights household because of me. However, I was not the legitimate daughter of the Zhong family and was not favored by my father. So he still faced many difficulties. It was only after he was promoted that my father, the Minister of the Imperial Secretariat, was willing to help him a little. Upon careful reflection, I realized that Shin Qingjian actually had a very powerful rival. They all called him the 9,000 years, the emperor's favorite, and the most trusted choice for the new emperor who would ascend the throne. This 9,000 years was also personally bestowed the title by the emperor who later ascended the throne. I still remember clearly that it was precisely because of his formidable strength and their enmity that I overheard a few words while passing by the study. I learned that he was determined to eliminate him by any means necessary. However, this 9,000 years was as elusive as a dragon, and his methods were unpredictable, leaving Shin Qingjian completely helpless. As a result, he eventually turned his attention to me. I still remember how shameful and painful that night was. That day, he was drunk and cornered me in the room. His bloodshot eyes fixed on me. "Mingyue, I truly have no other options. There is something I need your help with." I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming he was just drunk. So I casually replied, "What is it that troubles you, sir?" He opened his mouth, then suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Mingyue, you must know that the 9th prince has always been my enemy. Now that the new emperor has ascended the throne, my career is likely over. But if you could help me, would you be willing to spend the night with the 9th prince? He and you are old acquaintances, he would certainly honor this favor." I was utterly shocked, never expecting him to say such a thing. I immediately shook off his hand and scolded him harshly. "Shin Qingjian, have you lost your mind? Do you know what you're saying? I am your legally wedded wife. And yet you..." Before I could finish speaking, he slapped me across the face. That night, he acted like a madman, forcing himself on me time and again. That night was my worst nightmare. And it was also that night that I became pregnant. Ironically, the next day he apologized to me, saying he had drunk too much and acted foolishly. Looking back now, it was just the deceitful words of a lowly man. But the old acquaintance he mentioned, the 9,000 years, piqued my curiosity. Who exactly was this 9,000 years? There was no doubt that he was one of the eunuchs in the palace. If I followed the course of my previous life, He was probably just a lowly palace attendant now. One in the palace. One outside. I wanted to enter the palace to find this old acquaintance. But I could only wait for the right opportunity. I never expected the opportunity to come so soon. The Empress was hosting a palace banquet and had invited the family members of all the ministers. I remembered this scene from my previous life. In my previous life, my eldest sister had accompanied me. She had always looked down on poor scholars and was determined to marry one of the princes. This palace banquet was her chance. As expected, she caught the eye of the third prince at the banquet, and the two exchanged glances. That night, they secretly met. Afterward, she thought she could rise to prominence. But the third prince was only playing with her. When the affair was exposed, my father, the minister of the secretariat, punished her with family discipline. It was precisely because of this incident that Zhong Eizhu never married. As for me, because of her scandal and with the help of Xin Qingjian's mediation, I achieved success in the officialdom and gradually gained my father's trust. When the news reached the Ministry of the Secretariat, Zhong Eizhu looked overjoyed. She readily agreed, but I could tell she might have set her sights on me this time. After all, upon hearing the news, Zhong Eizhu, who had always despised me, seemed like a different person. She not only sent the most luxurious clothes but also gave me numerous exquisite jewelry pieces. Seeing my puzzled expression, she began scolding me with a straight face. What? Do you think this lady is being kind to you because she considers you a sister? Listen carefully. Stop flattering yourself. I'm giving you these things only to let you use them temporarily. It's so you won't end up looking poor and shabby, unable to appear in public, and bring shame to the Ministry of Rights. I knew she had never been this kind before. In my previous life, when she found out we were going to the palace together, she immediately came to my room and threatened me, saying I wasn't allowed to dress more beautifully than her. Thinking of this, I obediently replied, "Thank you, sister." After Zhong Eizhu left, even Xinger, who had been by my side the whole time, couldn't help but feel suspicious. Miss, the eldest miss is suddenly being so kind to you. She must be up to something again. Why don't you just skip the palace banquet this time? I lowered my eyes. Staring at the silk robes and brocades beside me, I must go. The day of the palace banquet arrived quickly. However, I did not wear the clothes or jewelry she had given me. Seeing that I was still dressed in ordinary attire, Zhong Eizhu's face twisted into a hideous expression. Zhong Mingyue, are you deliberately trying to oppose me? Where are the clothes I told you to wear? I looked timid, lowering my eyes to explain. Sister, please don't be angry. It's all my fault. I accidentally stained the clothes. Perhaps I should not go this time? Hearing this, she widened her eyes and finally waved her hand. Never mind. Never mind. Just wear what you're wearing. There's no time to change. Let's go. Just like in my previous life, we entered the palace under the matriarch's guidance. The difference was that Zhong Eizhu did not seduce the third prince. Despite this, the third prince was still drawn to her. After a few cups of wine, the third prince approached her on his own. The matriarch was overjoyed, thinking her daughter had a chance to climb the social ladder, and did not drive them away. I sat in the corner, trying to find an opportunity to look for the future ninth prince. Seeing that the two of them were too busy to notice me, I made up an excuse and left with Xinger. Little did I know that as soon as we left, Zhong Eizhu followed behind. Realizing this, I hurried my steps, hoping to shake her off. Fortunately, at the corner, Zhong Eizhu was stopped by the third prince. Seeing her being entangled, I didn't want to get involved, so I temporarily found a place to hide. A dramatic scene unfolded. Zhong Eizhu being entangled by the third prince was witnessed by Xin Qingjian. seeing his beloved woman being harassed. He naturally couldn't stand it, even if the other party was the third prince, and stepped forward to intervene. Even after they had left, I was still trembling with fear. I couldn't even imagine what Zhong Aishu might have done to me if she had chased after me. Just then, the sound of beating mixed with curses came from a distance. Just beat him to death. Yes. Beat him to death. He's just a lowly servant. The palace won't even notice if one less person is missing. That was a young eunuch I had saved in my previous life. Since I had encountered him again in this life, I decided to save him as well. So I walked toward the direction of the sounds and deliberately called out, "This servant greets your highness." The men heard the commotion and immediately stopped beating him, but still muttered under their breath, "You little bastard. You're lucky today." Once they had gone far enough, I approached him and asked, "Are you okay?" He was lying on the ground, his face bruised and swollen, but those beautiful peach blossom eyes were still as captivating as they had been in my previous life. He glanced at me timidly and shook his head. I saw blood on his forehead, so I took out a handkerchief and handed it to him to wipe his face. "Thank you for saving me, young lady." His voice was exceptionally pleasant, with a hint of magnetic warmth, unlike the effeminate tones of other eunuchs. I nodded and prepared to leave, but heard someone call out to him, "Feiyan, your master warned you to be careful of that group. Look at you, you nearly lost your life." Feiyan. Wait. I think I've heard that name before. No. He's the future 9th prince. That night, Zhong Aishu and Shuangwen tasted forbidden fruit for the first time, and I had a dream I had never seen in my previous life. In the dream, I was tortured to death, and Zhong Aishu also met a tragic end. I saw a tall, slender figure standing with his back to those bandits, Feiyan. He said something to the bandits, and they immediately panicked. "What should we do? The person we just killed is Shuangwen's wife. Isn't she the second young miss most favored by the Minister of the Secretariat? If we killed her, neither Shuangwen nor the Minister of Rights will spare us. If that's the case, let's just go all out." So when Zhong Aishu was giving those people silver, their tone turned hostile. "Miss Zhong is so cruel. You actually made us kill your own sister. Miss Zhong, aren't you afraid the Minister of Rights will be furious when he finds out?" Zhong Aishu laughed triumphantly. "Don't worry. As long as you don't say a word, no one will ever know." Upon hearing this, one of the bandits walked in from outside, nodded to the leader, and she was quickly knocked unconscious. When she came to, she found herself bound and gagged. Just as I had been tortured by those men, she was tortured to death by them. Even in death, she never knew that this was all Feiyan's revenge against her. Of course, this band of bandits also met a miserable end. However, by the time he found me, it was already too late. I saw the hatred in his eyes and the heartbreak he felt when he saw my remains. It turned out that everything he had done was to avenge me. All because, back then, I had saved him by accident in the palace, and this man of honor and loyalty had come to regard me as his savior. When I woke up, it was already broad daylight. Thinking back to everything in my dream, I couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. But I was certain of one thing after last night's events. Feiyan would regard me as his savior, just as he had in his previous life. In that case, I would have a chance to survive. By noon, Zhong Aishu, who rarely ventured out, once again came to the backyard. Compared to yesterday, she looked radiant today. She spoke with mockery, "You're truly a worthless life. Such fine silk robes, and you can't even appreciate them. It's clear you're just like your lowly stepmother, destined to live in the mud." This time, I didn't hold back. Instead, I smiled and asked her, "Where did you go last night, sister?" "I went out for a walk with Shinger. When we came back, It seemed like you were tidying your clothes. Were you bitten by wild cats or dogs from the palace? One sentence was enough to enrage Zhong Eizhu. She shouted, Zhong Mingyue, watch your mouth. I feigned ignorance and asked, was it not wild cats and dogs? But wild men? Enough! She shouted. Stop talking nonsense. Or I'll have someone tear your mouth apart. That depends on whether you let me live comfortably. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I saw last night. Seeing that I had the upper hand, Zhong Eizhu could only threaten in a low voice. I don't care what you saw last night. In any case, you'd better keep it to yourself. Or else I'll make you regret it. Let's go! I called out behind her. Sister, you haven't taken the red hairpin and dress you brought a few days ago. Wait! But she had already left without looking back. Perhaps because of this incident, the minister of the secretariat, who had been considering the matter, arranged a marriage for the two within a couple of days and prepared to set a date for the wedding. However, things took an unexpected turn. One day, as I passed by the study, I heard Zhong Eizhu clinging to my father and crying, Father, you don't know the injustice your daughter has suffered. At the palace banquet, the third prince clung to me and had ulterior motives. If it weren't for Qing Jian coming to my rescue, I would have. Who would have thought that the third prince would hold a grudge and target Qing Jian everywhere? Father, you must help him. My father seemed to be getting impatient with her pestering. So he said, help him. Help him. It's easy for you to say. But how can I help? Are you really asking me to offend the third prince for a little top scholar? I didn't want to listen to the conversation between father and daughter anymore. Unexpectedly, I heard Zhong Eizhu lower her voice and say, Father, the third prince is just holding a grudge because he didn't get his way that day. Your daughter sees that your younger sister is quite pretty. If we send her to the third prince as an apology, perhaps this matter. Hearing this, my mind went blank. My father had never cared about my life or death. And now with Zhong Eizhu meddling, the outcome was clear. I knew I had to escape. Back in my room, my mind was in a complete mess. The ninth prince, Feiyan. In my previous life, aside from saving him in the palace that one time, when else had I ever encountered him? I racked my brain and could only recall a few scattered memories. It seemed like during my wedding ceremony with Qing Jian in my previous life, I had heard that familiar voice while wearing the red veil. Gentle yet cold. Gentle yet authoritative. It was him. It seems that, besides waiting until Zhong Eizhu gets married, I have no other options. Although the wedding date has been set, it's the same as the day I married Qing Jian in my previous life. But there are still 4 whole months left. What should I do to survive until then? Looking out the window at the snow beginning to fall, I began to remove my outer garments one by one. Xinger saw me and rushed forward to drape a cloak over my shoulders. Miss, you'll catch a cold. I held her hand. No. I must catch a cold. How else can I escape this ordeal? Hearing this, Xinger could only let go with reddened eyes. After stripping down to my undergarments, I had her open a few windows slightly. Without a charcoal fire, the cold wind blowing in through the windows made the room as cold as an ice cellar. After freezing for an entire hour, I could no longer endure it. My entire body shook uncontrollably. Seeing me like this, Xinger began to plead. Miss, it's enough. Why don't you lie down and warm up first? If we keep this up, it won't just be a cold. I'm afraid something worse might happen. I nodded and tried to move. But before I could take 2 steps, everything went black before my eyes. When I came to, the room was filled with the doctor and my father. I didn't hear what the doctor said, but I heard my father snort coldly. Why get sick now of all times? I knew the plan had worked. In the days that followed, I began to rest quietly in my bedroom. At first, I was feverish and drowsy. But as time went on, I grew weaker and weaker. I managed to sit up, but I couldn't stop coughing. During this time, Zhong pretended to check on me, but later she only sent people to inquire, fearing that the cold might infect her. The illness lingered on. In the end, I pretended not to have recovered but secretly nurtured my health. Finally, I endured 4 months. On the day Zhong and Qingjian got married, I saw Feiyan again. This was the first time I had seen him in public. Compared to the young eunuch he had been back then, he now held a high position. Dressed in a moon-white brocade robe, it was hard to tell he was a eunuch. He looked more like a graceful nobleman. I'm sure my eyes were filled with joy as I looked at him. But he only gave me a casual glance in the crowd, as if to acknowledge my presence. Taking advantage of the crowd, I followed him from behind. He seemed to have guessed I was looking for him and led me to the backyard. As soon as I saw him, I blurted out my request. "Lord Fei, please save me." I then told him everything that had happened at home in detail. I thought he would ask questions, but he just looked at me silently. After a moment, he asked, "Do you truly trust me?" I nodded without hesitation, yes. Not only could I trust him in my previous life, but I could trust him in this one as well. He stepped closer, his towering figure exuding an overwhelming presence. He then asked in a deep voice, "If this plan involves you marrying me as a concubine, are you willing?" I admitted that I was surprised by this outcome, but I still nodded. "I am willing." I don't know if it was an illusion, but I saw a flash of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by joy, and finally returning to calm. "All right. I'll help you." That night, Feiyan stayed at the Ministry of Rites. After talking with my father for a while, I learned that he had risen to a high position even faster than in my previous life. Now he was a favorite of the emperor, and even my father, the minister of the Secretariat, had to be cautious around him, and the reason he stayed was to propose marriage. My father was shocked upon hearing this. But even though he didn't like me as his daughter, he couldn't refuse out of respect for their relationship. Little did they know that Feiyan used my father's weakness as leverage, leaving him no choice but to agree. All of this was later revealed to me by Feiyan himself. He looked at me, his expression returning to its previous coldness. "I'm just a eunuch. Are you sure?" I placed my hand over his lips. "I'm sure." When my fingers moved away, I saw his ears were red. Perhaps because their plan had failed, the third prince continued to suppress Qingjian in the court. 3 months later, Feiyan arrived on a fine horse, dressed in splendor, to marry me. The wedding procession stretched for 10 miles. And compared to my elder sister Zhong, the scale of this wedding was unparalleled in history. After the wedding, I moved into the palace. Feiyan went out during the day and returned at night. Even when the emperor summoned him, he had someone quietly inform me, fearing he might wake me. He didn't know I had always been a light sleeper, easily awakened by the slightest sound. From him, I also learned bits and pieces about Zhong. For instance, Qingjian's career was in jeopardy, and to secure his position, he had given Zhong to the third prince shortly after their marriage. In this life, Zhong never achieved her desires. Meanwhile, under Feiyan's protection, I spent my days in idleness. Shiner said that compared to before I entered the palace, I had even gained a few pounds. Frightened, I dared not eat or drink excessively, and after finishing my meals, I would walk around within the designated area of the palace. Just when I thought I would never see Zhong again, I accidentally bumped into her. She clung tightly to the third prince's robe, pleading desperately, "Your Highness, the doctor diagnosed that I am 3 months pregnant with your child." Before she could finish, The third prince brushed her aside with a sweep of his sleeve. My child? Lady Shen must be telling a huge joke. Remember, your husband is Shen Qingjian, not this prince. This prince advises Lady Shen to stop talking nonsense. Be careful the wind doesn't twist your tongue and cause trouble. Facing the third prince's cruelty, Zhong Eishu collapsed onto the ground in despair, muttering to herself, not your child? Ha! Shen Qingjian also said it's not his. And now you say the same. You're all trying to drive me to my death. Even as she spoke harshly, she staggered to her feet and left in disarray. Seeing her like this, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Those who do evil should receive their just punishment. Feiyan has been very kind to me. He almost always brings back small trinkets when he returns. I've often wondered why he rose to such a high position so early in this life. I've tried to ask him indirectly several times, but I always stopped myself. He's an extremely intelligent man. If I were to ask him directly, he might become suspicious. It's better to live a peaceful life than to seek trouble. There was just one thing that puzzled me greatly. Ever since Shen Qingjian had Zhong Eishu presented to the third prince, the third prince had indeed stopped oppressing Shen Qingjian, but the one who began oppressing him instead was Feiyan. This is why Shen Qingjian is still just a low-ranking official today. When Feiyan took me out for a stroll, I encountered Shen Qingjian again. Without the glory of his past life, he now looked particularly destitute and forlorn. Another harsh winter had arrived, and the snow fell especially heavily that day. As I peered out from the carriage curtain, he was standing on the street, large snowflakes drifting down onto his head, quickly covering it in a layer of white. I stood there silently, watching him alone and destitute, feeling an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. I even wondered how I could have been so blind to fall for such a despicable man. In terms of appearance, talent, and even the aura he exuded, he couldn't compare to Feiyan in the slightest. Especially after getting to know him better after marriage, I became even more certain. If Feiyan had not been an eunuch, but had taken the imperial examination as an ordinary person, he would have been the top scholar that year. While I was still thinking, a large hand wrapped around my waist from behind and secretly tightened its grip. Immediately afterwards, an extremely cold voice reached my eardrums. What are you looking at? Madam? Why are you so lost in thought? I startled, hurriedly responding, nothing. He snorted lightly, took out a delicate pearl hairpin from his robe, and pinned it in my hair. That worthless trinket, looking at it too much will only tarnish the lady's eyes. With that, he turned and climbed out of the carriage, sitting down in the driver's seat. Before I could react, he had already tightened the reins and galloped straight toward Shen Qingjian. Mud and snow splashed all over Shen Qingjian. I raised my eyebrows. Even dirtier now. Soon after, the Ministry of Revenue was implicated in a case of factionalism and corruption, and the emperor ordered the family to be confiscated and exiled to Ningguda. It was said that my father died on the way to exile due to the extreme cold. As for my stepmother, she died of grief a few days later. Zhong Eishu gave birth to a son in the same year, but she was also neglected as a result. Not only was she secretly mocked by the servants in the mansion, but she also had to endure the torment of her mother-in-law. The Ministry of Rights mansion collapsed completely, and Shen Qingjian no longer held back. The day after the Zhong family was exiled, Shen Qingjian brought that woman back. The children she brought back were much older than Zhong Eishu's children. When the women of the capital talked about this, they all laughed about it. After Feiyan finished telling me this, I raised my eyebrows indifferently. Why are you telling me this, my lord? Feiyan looked at me. His eyes filled with inquiry. I heard that the former lady had been deeply infatuated with this Shen official for a long time. Telling you this today is merely to let you know that he is not a good man. As for you, as long as I am here, no one will dare to speak ill of you behind your back. As he spoke, His hand slowly reached toward my face. But just as it was about to touch me, he stopped. A faint sadness rose in his eyes. Mingyue. Once everything has settled, if you wish to divorce, tell me anytime. If you still wish to marry, I am also willing. I grabbed his hand and pressed it against my face. With such a good husband, why would I want to divorce? He smiled happily and embraced me tightly for the first time. After the new emperor ascended the throne, Feiyan, like in his previous life, became the 9,000 years old. Shuangwen had chosen the wrong side this time, aligning himself with the treacherous third prince, who harbored ambitions to usurp the throne. Unfortunately, everyone he had brought with him was captured and sentenced to execution. Their entire family executed. Though I did not know the outcome of Shuangwen's previous life, I knew that as long as Feiyan was alive, he would never meet a good end. Before the execution of the Shin family, Feiyan looked at me solemnly. Perhaps there is someone you wish to see one last time. At least to see how she is faring now. The person he was referring to was Zhong Aizhu. The former beauty was no longer to be seen. In her early 20s, she huddled in a corner, her back hunched like an old woman. Feiyan told me she had fallen ill, and even if it were not due to the Shin family's downfall, her days were numbered. Upon seeing me, Zhong Aizhu became unusually agitated. She rushed out of the corner where she had been huddling, her hands, like chicken claws, clutching the prison door, staring at me intently and asking, "Why? Why did I choose the wrong path again? Did you already know? Did you know what the third prince would do to me? So you refused to wear the clothes and hairpin I gave you? You knew that Shuangwen had other women and children outside. That day in my father's room, you weren't begging me to marry Shuangwen, you were trying to avoid it. Weren't you?" I remained silent, but she continued to stare at me intently, as if trying to see through me. Finally, I replied, "Yes." Upon hearing my answer, Zhong Aizhu burst into laughter. "Shin Mingyue, you worthless woman. So you were the one who harmed me all along. Why didn't you just die? Why? I refuse to accept this. I refuse to accept this. You lowly creature should have died long ago with your lowly mother. You should have spent your entire life under my feet." I didn't want to respond to her anymore, but her words were so disgusting. Before she could open her mouth again, I suddenly pulled out the hairpin from my head and stabbed it into her eye. With Zhong Aizhu's screams, warm blood sprayed onto my hand. She stumbled and fell to the ground, writhing in pain. I spoke calmly. "Zhong Aizhu, you forced me to do this. Since that's the case, you'll just have to enjoy the torment of death." She continued to curse, and I turned to the prison guard beside me. The guard immediately understood and flipped her body over, skillfully cutting out her tongue. The entire prison finally fell silent. "Zhong Aizhu, this is what you owe me." Upon exiting the cell, I saw Feiyan waiting for me outside, glancing at the red mark on my wrist. He immediately pulled out a handkerchief and wiped it carefully. Such dirty work should be left to the lower-ranking guards. "How could you dirty your hands with it?" I smiled wryly. There was no choice. She was simply too noisy. He nodded and instructed the people around him. "Madam Shin upset my wife. Make sure to treat her well." After wiping the blood off my wrist, Feiyan pulled out another handkerchief from his robe, unfolding it layer by layer. He revealed a familiar jade bracelet. I saw that it was broken, but you couldn't bear to throw it away, even looking at it every day with a sad expression. It must be something very important to you. So I found the best restorer to fix it. Take a look and see what you think. The handkerchief wrapped around the jade bracelet was the same one I had given him to wipe his face with in the palace. As for the bracelet itself, it was a keepsake my mother had left me. I held the jade bracelet in my hands, a bitter taste rising in my eyes. Phaon. Phaon. You have been so kind to me. How can I ever repay you? Seeing that I didn't speak, he simply embraced me gently. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, and his voice began to tremble. He said, Mingyue, I had a dream. A very terrifying dream. In the dream, you married Shinqingjian and were framed by your elder sister. And in the end, at that time, I was so filled with hatred, hating myself for not being able to save you, hating myself. As he spoke, his entire body trembled, and the tips of his fingers holding my hand grew cold. I interrupted him. It was just a dream. Now, aren't you protecting me well? His Adam's apple moved again, and a low voice came. Yes. This time, rest assured, I will protect you with my life.